Now, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to grow, so are the parallels being drawn between it and another deadly virus that struck the globe more than a century ago.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at times when history rhymed in some of the worst ways imaginable.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Before we continue, check out this single from Sound Mojo's Audio, Songs from Iran, reimagining Persian melodies as modern rock, metal, and pop songs. Check out the full track and album below.
When I rise, you fill my head. In every dream, it's you I've met.
Iraq 2003 versus Iran 2026. The 2003 invasion of Iraq and the 2026 strikes on the Islamic Republic of Iran share historical parallels that have prompted intense debate.
But we've also been hearing directly from people inside the country. A man from Tehran said he disagreed with the attacks and told the BBC that Iran could be ruined if attacks continued at pace.
Proponents of military action argue that the strikes are necessary to address regional security threats and degrade the infrastructure of the IRGC, which international bodies have documented as being central to the violent suppression of Iranian civil dissent and mass protests throughout early 2026.
As soon as the first protest broke out in Tehran, we all knew there's something big starting.
Iran, after all, is the oldest nation in the world, dating back to 3200 BC, with a strong civic and nationalist identity. Iraq was a Sykes-Picot project, with international divisions and factions that have never historically coalesced as a union. Whereas Iraqis resented American presence, Iranians view the intervention as a rescue operation. Conversely, critics argue caution, noting that the rhetoric used to justify these interventions echoes past intelligence-based arguments that led to prolonged regional destabilization, while analysts note that the complex internal military and social structures in Iran make the current situation distinct from the 2003 conflict. The debates persist over whether such military pressure can achieve intended security goals without exacerbating the existing humanitarian and regional challenges.
It does appear to have been a presumption in the White House, certainly in President Trump's mind, that the overwhelming military advantage that the US has over Iran would be enough to intimidate Iran into suing for peace, coming to the negotiating table, and capitulating on America's terms, or Israel's terms for that matter.
Prohibition and the war on drugs. In the 1920s, the United States banned alcohol, the result of a decades-long temperance movement that promised improved public morals and social order.
Many Americans believed Prohibition, later called the Noble Experiment, would last forever, bringing the country closer to God and family.
Instead, Prohibition helped organized crime flourish and entrenched powerful criminal networks. Prohibition drove drinking underground. Speakeasies replaced saloons. Violence increased, and enforcement was often too inconsistent and difficult to sustain.
I think Prohibition is the first opportunity where you were really forced to choose between a rock and a hard place.
The war on drugs followed a similar path after its declaration in 1971. Criminalization didn't eliminate substance use. It did, however, expand illicit markets, fueling a sharp increase in arrests. Both campaigns expanded the reach of the carceral state. The war on drugs in particular helped drive a surge in mass incarceration. As prison populations grew, private prison companies expanded alongside them, introducing profit incentives into criminal justice.
The war on drugs has fundamentally reshaped the way we live. It affects everybody's lives, but it doesn't affect everyone the same.
Dust Bowl and climate migration. In the 1930s, the American Great Plains broke down.
During the 1930s, a terrible drought struck Texas and the Great Plains. This one was different from any drought in the past. It triggered a decade-long series of dust storms that became known as the Dust Bowl.
Severe drought struck lands already weakened by poor farming practices. Lush topsoil turned to dust. Crops soon failed, farms collapsed, and entire towns were abandoned. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to migrate westward out of necessity.
Many were forced to leave Texas in search of better farmland. Those who remained, however, received help from the federal government.
These migrants were displaced by environmental collapse long before modern language existed to describe it. Climate migration today follows a similar chain reaction. Rising temperatures intensify droughts, floods, and extreme weather across the planet. Farmland becomes unstable, and water supplies grow increasingly scarce. This deadly combination is straining local economies. People are moving because staying now means hunger, debt, or danger.
The impacts that we're seeing on farmers, for example, around the world who are reliant on the land and precipitation for their livelihoods, the reasons that they end up moving is more about economic.
Chernobyl and Fukushima. Both disasters trace back to similar types of failure. Safety systems that appeared adequate on paper but collapsed under real-world stress.
They wanted to see whether the reactor could still be cooled if the plant lost power. But they violated safety protocols and several power surges occurred inside the reactor.
At Chernobyl, a reactor design with known flaws was pushed through a risky test. The test was one with critical safeguards disabled. When something went wrong, there was no margin for error left. At Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, engineers underestimated the scale of a major tsunami.
なんか起こりそうのない。絶対安全だから。絶対ついてましたから。
Backup generators were placed where floodwaters could reach them. Once they failed, cooling systems failed as well. Parallel is stark. Disaster flowed down from risks that were known, underestimated, or inadequately planned for.
The tsunami flooded the nuclear power plant. Result? Massive overheating, and reactors 1, 2, and 3 suffered meltdowns.
The lesson is clear. Nuclear power requires preparing for the worst-case scenario at every turn. Exxon Valdez and Deepwater Horizon both followed a similar script shaped by oversight failures and institutional complacency.
One of the worst oil spills in U.S. history brought Americans images of blackened beaches, dying wildlife, outrage, and betrayal.
Safety systems were present, but they proved inefficient when things went wrong. Then, the Exxon Valdez ran aground. Crude oil spread across hundreds of miles of pristine Alaskan coastline.
Neither Exxon nor Alyeska, the oil pipeline company in charge of the immediate response, was ready for such a large spill.
Alyeska was supposed to have an emergency response team at its terminal in Valdez, but 8 years ago the team was disbanded.
The cleanup crews struggled thanks to the remote terrain and brutal weather. Wildlife deaths mounted, and some ecological damage persisted for decades. Years later, Deepwater Horizon failed in a very different setting, but for similar reasons. Warning signs were misinterpreted, and safety tests were read incorrectly. A blowout soon followed. 11 workers were killed, and enormous volumes of oil poured into the Gulf of Mexico.
BP had an opportunity to explain to the American people, and quite frankly, they blew it. He was going to do whatever he could to protect the company.
In both cases, overconfidence in inadequate safeguards slowed a decisive response. Accidents escalated into long-term environmental disasters, Salem witch trials, and moral panics. In Salem, lies were accepted as fact. Accusations relied on visions and other so-called spectral evidence.
One of the peculiarities of the Salem witch trials is that those who confess are granted clemency.
If you maintained your innocence, but you were found guilty, then you were put to death.
Historians later pointed to personal grudges, property disputes, and social resentment as major drivers behind many accusations. Authority figures legitimized the panic, and executions followed. In retrospect, Salem should be an embarrassing moment in American history.
Ultimately, more than 200 men and women wind up accused. Over 50 confess and are committed to prison. 20 refuse to confess and are executed.
But modern moral panics operate in much the same way. McCarthyism policy of suspicion, elevating accusations over proof. During the Satanic Panic, fantastical stories of ritual abuse led to wrongful prosecutions and ruined lives. Early HIV/AIDS was widely moralized, framed by some as punishment rather than a medical crisis. Video games, Muslims, and LGBTQ people have all been portrayed as looming threats.
Have been called deprogrammers of young people. Well, at first I didn't like that term. The more I got to thinking about it, the more I did like it, because I think somebody better start deprogramming these young people.
In each case, fear spreads quickly, proving useful to those who exploit it. 1918 flu and COVID misinformation. During the 1918 flu, misinformation spread almost as fast as the virus itself.
But there's another horror unfolding in the shadow of war. A deadly virus
sweeping the world.
Wartime censorship shaped what people even heard. Mask mandates triggered a virulent anti-masker backlash. Some called such mandates an attack on civil liberties. Non-wearers were sometimes branded as dangerous slackers.
There was this idea that wearing masks was a good idea, but there wasn't a very clear message that everybody should wear masks.
A century later, COVID followed a depressingly similar trajectory. Scientists had to learn about the disease in real time, leading to conflicting guidance. That bred distrust. False cures circulated widely. Masking, lockdowns, and vaccines became cultural flashpoints instead of universally acknowledged public health tools. Social media amplified confusion at unprecedented speed.
Doctors say misinformation is still a top reason patients hesitate.
The reason it's bad out there is because people are rejecting a technology that can save their lives. And the reason they're rejecting that technology is because they're reading things online that are misleading them.
When fear meets uncertainty, misinformation thrives. Hundreds of thousands died unnecessarily. The death of the Roman Republic and modern democratic backsliding. The Roman Republic didn't collapse because its citizens rejected democracy. It collapsed because democracy stopped working for them.
Caesar believes that the Roman Republic cannot function anymore because it was set up to rule over a small city, and they are now ruling over a vast empire. The forms of government in the Republic simply can't manage this.
Economic inequality widened as political elites became increasingly deadlocked. Violence entered everyday politics. Strong men like Marius, Sulla, and later Caesar rose to power. They presented themselves as restorers of order. Fear, emergency powers, and personal loyalty were weapons against the system. Each temporary exception weakened the Republic further.
Caesar has come to the conclusion that the only way to save the Republic is to fundamentally destroy and rebuild it.
Modern democratic backsliding shows the same pattern. Polarization is spreading, as is distrust in institutions. There's a growing appetite for decisive, not deliberative leaders. Elections are questioned, while independent courts face pressure. Political opponents are framed as existential threats rather than rivals. Like Rome, democratic erosion doesn't arrive all at once. It's the proverbial frog in a boiling pot.
Faith in democracy is running on fumes.
Tulip mania and crypto bubbles. In the Dutch Golden Age, tulips gained stunning flame-like color breaks thanks to a botanical virus. They quickly morphed from flower to speculative financial assets.
In the 1630s, tulip prices began to rise.
Oh, brother, I can't keep up.
And then prices went from high to completely insane.
Rare bulbs were traded at extreme prices, often through futures-style contracts that changed hands repeatedly without delivery. Tulips' value became detached from the actual plant. When confidence broke in 1637, prices collapsed rapidly, exposing how much of the boom rested on belief rather than fundamentals. Crypto bubbles follow a strikingly similar pattern. Crypto, and later NFTs, promised financial revolution and independence from traditional systems. Prices surged on speculation, leverage, and fear of missing out. Technical language and hype obscured risk for many casual investors. When sentiment turns, markets unwind quickly, and many average investors feel the pain.
Elliott is once again alarmed by crypto, which the firm says is, quote, ground zero for the speculative frenzy across markets.
McCarthyism and the evolution of post-9/11 Big Brother. McCarthyism transformed fear into a governing tool. Loyalty oaths, blacklists, and congressional hearings treated suspicion as proof.
McCarthy is a person who, for what he thought were the right reasons, did all the wrong things.
Careers were destroyed, not for crimes, but for beliefs, associations, or refusal to cooperate. The state learned how effectively fear could discipline a population from the inside. After 9/11, that instinct shifted from ideology to infrastructure. Vast surveillance programs expanded under secrecy, justified by a permanent emergency.
How did the government justify collecting all this data? They argue that fighting terrorism is like finding a needle in a haystack, and you need the entire haystack to find that needle.
Intelligence budgets ballooned. Data collection became routine, invisible, and legally murky until whistleblowers revealed how deeply monitoring had embedded itself into everyday life. Today, those systems increasingly intersect with politics again. Loyalty tests have returned, as have workforce purges and ideological vetting. The methods may have evolved, but revanchist powers are running the same playbook.
Is Dodge really about good government, or is this a way for Trump and his team to try to get rid of federal employees
January 6th and the Beer Hall Putsch. In both Munich and Washington, crowds were mobilized by the same conviction, that the political system was illegitimate. Only direct action could restore the nation.
Gentlemen, I know this is often said and deeply felt, but none more deeply than tonight. May God and the people of Germany be with us.
In 1923, armed supporters followed Hitler into a chaotic coup attempt powered by conspiracy, grievance, and theatrical confidence. In 2021, a crowd driven by false claims of election fraud stormed the Capitol with similar faith.
To use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
They all believed that pressure, violence, and spectacle would force their leader into power. Neither uprising succeeded, but success wasn't really the point. In both cases, the danger sprang from what followed. Failure, padded by propaganda, became the official party line. Participants became partisan martyrs. The attempts were proof enough that the systems were weak and worth attacking again.
People were saying, well, this just can't happen. And these groups of folks, they can't do that. Well, now we know they can.
Are there any past events that you think may be coming back around? Let us know in the comments.